Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, depending on where you are, of course. Welcome to the Georgia Bar Construction Section's annual in-house roundtable. Before we dive in, just a few housekeeping items. We will not take questions during the presentation, but if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in chat or save them for the end. We'll try and save a few minutes for Q&A if possible. If you enjoyed today's event, we encourage you to sign up for the construction section's upcoming events, such as our joint Georgia-Tennessee Construction Conference on October 9th and 10th in Chattanooga in person, our Introduction to Liens virtual CLE happening this Thursday, and our upcoming Construction 101 series. Information on all these can be found on the Georgia Bar website. So now let's move on to our amazing panelists. Thank you all for being here today. We're really looking forward to this discussion. Let me start off by introducing Michael Green, the General Counsel at Edged. Michael attended the University of Georgia Law School and then worked as an attorney in Jones Day in mergers and acquisitions. He moved in-house to become the chief counsel in real estate investments and securities at Koch Industries in 2022. Recently became the general counsel at Edged, where he's responsible for overseeing all legal compliance and regulatory matters for that company. Ishmael Al-Sheikh is the chief legal officer at Vantage Data Centers. Ish attended the Northwestern University School of Law and then was also an attorney at Jones Day as a partner in the mergers and acquisitions group. He did tell me that I can call him Ish, by the way. While at Jones Day, Ish advised on a number of transactions for Vantage, including a $3.5 billion partnership, and then joined the company to become Vantage's general counsel in 2021 and chief legal officer in 2022. Karen Stein, next on our list, is the general counsel and chief administrative officer at T5 Data Centers. Karen attended the Emory University School of Law here in Atlanta and then joined Troutman Sanders as an attorney. Karen has held general counsel roles at a number of companies in her career, such as IO and CPG, and was a vice president of legal at Iron Mountain. She was also part of the legal department at the PGA Tour, which I personally find the most interesting. Karen became the general counsel at T5 in 2023 and recently became the chief administrative officer there as well. Our last panelist is Mark Chavez, the general counsel at Applied Digital. Mark attended law school at George Mason University and was then an attorney at Locked Lord. Mark then spent a number of years in the legal departments of ExxonMobil, World Fuel Services, PBF Energy, and Ocean Points Terminals, before moving over to become the general counsel, secretary, and chief compliance officer at Applied Digital last year. Finally, my name is Greg Jacobson. I attended law school here at the University of Georgia School of Law, and I'm a partner at King & Spalding in the Construction and Procurement Group. I am Chambers ranked and recognized by Legal 500 in construction, and I'm a BTI Client Service All-Star. I'm your moderator this afternoon. I'm very much looking forward to hearing from this, frankly, amazing group of panelists. FYI, for all of you on the call, we have been approved for professionalism CLE, so we will be discussing some professionalism points today. But let's just start off with some expanded introductions. If you could, panel, please, let's take a moment and talk about your company and your role there. Maybe, Michael, we could start with you.
Yeah, sure. So our company is called Edged. Edged is a developer and operator of sustainable AI-ready data centers. We're still relatively new and small. We currently have campuses that are either operational or under construction in 7 US markets. And we offer both co-location or multi-tenant data centers, as well as built solutions for our customers. We are a member of the Endeavor group of companies, which is a family of related companies, all of which are developing some type of sustainable infrastructure solution. And that ranges from waterless cooling to microgrid solutions to carbon capture technologies.
Thank you, Michael. Ish?
Vantage Data Centers, founded in 2010 as sort of a greenfield kind of venture by Silver Lake. And in 2017, while I was at Jones Day, I advised a consortium that included Digital Bridge, PSP, and TIA, the teacher's pension, on the acquisition of Vantage. It was a two-market data center business, Santa Clara and Quincy, Washington. Since then, expanded globally to the EMEA region through two acquisitions, ETIX and NGD, Next Generation Data Centers, and then into APAC. And it's been a pretty wild ride. I came here in 2021. Significantly, Silver Lake came back into the fold last year. So they're sort of our co-lead investor, and it's been incredible collaborating with them. So been a fun ride. One thing I can say about this industry is we put together our goals at the start of every year, and then we get to the summer and chuckle at how much of a different company it is and how outdated our goals are. So this is a sort of gig that requires, I think, being quite nimble. And if you don't like chaos, it's probably not not something you'd gravitate towards. So Michael and Karen and others are nodding. So I guess they've had a similar experience. So
I would
that's what
guess
we're
they
up to.
feel pretty similarly, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Karen?
So yeah, hi, I'm Karen Stein. I work at T5 Data Centers. We are actually based in Atlanta, so it's full circle for me since I started my legal career in Atlanta. We're a full life cycle data center company, so we buy and develop land. We build data centers for ourselves and for customers, so we have a full construction team, and then we also operate data centers, both for ourselves and for multiple third parties. As I'm sure everyone on this panel has, we've had enormous growth in the last couple of years, mostly due to AI. But I've been in data centers for a very long time, and it's as Ish said, it has been a wild ride, lots of ups, lots of downs, but right now it's like the field of dreams. If you have it, they will be. If you build it, they will be there. So it's pretty chaotic right now, which is a good word for it.
Definitely. Thank you, Karen. And Mark?
Yes, so I'm with Applied Digital Corporation. So we're a relatively new company, only a few years old. We originally started doing crypto mining data centers for crypto, and then we pivoted to AI a few years ago. So we recently acquired our first customer, CoreWeave, for our Ellendale campus in North Dakota. And that'll be a 400 megawatt campus consisting of 3 buildings there. And then we really recently announced that we're breaking ground on our second campus in the Fargo area. That'll be a campus capable of scaling to a gigawatt. And it's been, as Ish noted, it's been kind of a wild ride. I've only been here approximately a year. And as he noted, the things that we thought we were going to do a year ago are not the things that we're currently doing. And then as Karen noted, if we build it, they will come. The demand is tremendous. So we have an extensive pipeline, and we have inquiries that go out many, many years ahead of us, looking to try and lock up that power and that data center capacity. So it's a very, very exciting time for us.
Definitely, and for everybody. Thank you. So as everyone's saying, the demand is crazy right now, but frankly, demand can be a two-edged sword, right? So let's dive in with a very basic, easy to answer question about data center construction. In your opinion, what is the most pressing challenge in data center construction today? And how are your legal teams addressing those? Maybe Karen, we could start with you.
So I'm not sure there's one, but there's probably a top 3, right? Power availability is huge. And we can talk about that. I think the other big issue is supply chain. And really, I don't know what everyone else's experience has been, but really COVID changed that landscape. I still feel like we're paying catch up, especially on long lead items. And so there's a lot of demand forecasting that you have to do. And one of the ways we've started to look at it is start to do attic stock, right? And so even if we don't have a specific customer or a specific piece of property, we're still trying to plan for equipment needs that we'll need in construction. And then I think the third area that has become really an obstacle lately is regulatory issues. In my career, you know, at the beginning, no one even knew what a data center was. Now it almost has become a bad word. And Georgia in particular has had a lot of regulatory issues. Me and my team have spent a lot of time focused on what's happening at the legislature, proposed rulings. I think there's a moratorium in Palmetto County right now, literally just no data centers until they figure out what's going on. So I would say those are the three biggest issues that we're having in legal right now.
Yeah, agreed. So I would love to hear everyone else's thoughts on what the biggest issues are, but I'd love to just dive in a little bit more into what Karen is talking about first, and maybe talk about these three issues. So Mark, I'd love to hear how, you know, y'all are building something that's going to expand out to a gigawatt. How are you dealing with power procurement issues right now?
It's pretty challenging. We have a fairly robust pipeline of power that we've kind of locked up. I think we had the advantage of maybe getting a little bit ahead of this, and we locked up power as is available over a good period of time. We work with a very strong consultant who is very gifted at kind of finding where the power is, and we have to go where the power is. So we're not in Northern Virginia. We're not in the, you know, like the garden spots. We're in Ellendale, North Dakota. We're looking at sites in other areas that are largely rural, where the power is available. And then we're also having to bring our own infrastructure. So essentially, in a lot of these instances, we can identify the power. However, we're going to have to buy our own transformers. We're going to have to create our own substations, have the local public utilities service them, but we're having to bring that with us. And a lot of times these negotiations start out with, hey, we want this amount of power. And they're like, well, we don't have this equipment. We're like, we do. We're in the queue to get this. We'll bring that if you guys service us and kind of sign us up on an ESA. So that's kind of how we've tried to manage that. Now that comes obviously with the cost, and as Karen noted, it's certainly a lot of planning, because these things are they're certainly not small in any way, shape, or form. When I was in Europe earlier, they thought 30 megawatts was a big data center. When I was talking with them and we were talking about 400 a gig, they were just shocked at the scale of data centers that we're building in the US. So certainly I agree with Karen that power is definitely king.
Ish, any thoughts on power?
Yeah, I remember the first sort of crack. I think I was on my first trip here to the UK in 2022 when the utility in Vantage in Virginia reached out to a bunch of data center providers and basically said, we've sort of over allocated and we need to we need to figure out a way to deal with, the amount of demand that's kind of arisen. Fast forward 3 years, and I think it's, we've sort of seen this issue across the country. So it requires engagement with the utilities like we never had before. And frankly, just trying to explore all of the alternatives there are. And I think as particularly our customers have explored some of those alternatives from time to time, you run into the issues Karen has mentioned, which is sort of the regulatory public policy issues of, all right, well, now you're taking away power from churches and schools and that sort of thing. So it's just required sort of a 360 type of engagement. Whereas, I would say up until maybe 2021, you applied for power, you got it. It was sort of a much easier game.
Yeah.
Michael, any thoughts there?
I would add just a couple of things to that, and totally agree with all those comments. One thing that most of the utilities are doing now is for any sort of considerable load, there's a take or pay structure involved from the utility. So you have to think really critically about kind of how that fits with your customer agreement and who's bearing that risk of underutilization. So that's something that we spend a lot of time thinking about structuring with utilities. And then the second thing I would add is, all developers and operators, I believe, are starting to think really critically about bridging power solutions, behind the meter generation. I think, there's probably 2 or 3 years left of sort of grid power out there. And a lot of the big campuses that are going to be developed, at least for the short term, are going to need to be powered by some sort of on-site generation. So that's something to be in front of.
Great. So Michael, maybe we could stick with you. Are you seeing the same kind of supply chain issues that Karen was describing? And if so, what are you doing to kind of mitigate that? Are you ordering for all projects early, ordering on a project by project basis? What's the plan?
Yeah, very similar to what Karen is seeing. Certainly things like transformers, very long lead. We've sent teams to China, to vet suppliers there, all over the world, frankly, to vet suppliers, try to lock up supply chain. We have done some, warehousing of equipment. And, the other thing that we're doing is we're working very proactively with our customers because, big balance sheet, a lot of them tend to secure some of these long lead items as well. So that's a potential avenue if the utility is willing to use the equipment that they've stockpiled.
Mark, how about you?
Very similar. We're trying to get to basically where we have one basically full kit, essentially a full data center, basically in storage where we could kind of build it on demand.
Okay.
And kind of try and store other items. And the other thing that we've done proactively is that we kind of found that basically the more you spend with the supplier, the more favor you're going to get with them. So we kind of concentrated our purchases with key partners, so we can kind of get in the queue. And it takes a lot of involvement from our supply chain folks, our procurement group, to ensure that we're working with the right folks. But that's kind of how we've kind of managed it, and then trying to be really diligent about how we're forecasting what the demand is going to be and what data centers we're going to design and when those things need to be delivered, so we can kind of keep on the schedules that we need. One of the things that we didn't really talk about in terms of a challenge is really those compressed schedules. Everyone wants their capacity now. So we're having to try and meet that, pull schedules forward, and really kind of meet that and really work with our suppliers to ensure that we have the capability to do that and build and deliver on the times that we're telling our customers we can.
So with storing so much, and certainly this is what I agree I'm seeing, with everyone in the industry, but with storing so much, are there any, and this for anybody, are there any warranty concerns with, hey, we're going to have to store this for a while and that warranty may start to tick, it may start to run, or just because we're building so much so quickly, is that not really a concern? That's for anyone.
I think it's both, right? So we're talking to our suppliers if we are going to put it in storage about the ability to extend the warranty or have it not start until commissioning. But in reality, it's not an issue, right? Because we're using it. And, if you've got multiple projects going on, that's what we do. We put it at one site, but it's available to be moved to another site if needed. So luckily, that hasn't really been an issue, but it could be in the future, and so it is something we do think about.
So
when issues come up,
yeah,
sir. I was just going to say, when issues come up, the way the whole industry operates is it's sort of an ecosystem, whether it's with our customers, with the folks that supply to us. And if there is an issue, it's not always just relying on the contractual remedies, but rather saying, hey, like we've done an absolute ton of business with you, and what's a solution that gets us some of what we need and maybe doesn't hurt you too much, and how do we roll that forward to the next deal? And so it's a lot of wheeling and dealing, but the net of it is that ordering stuff early and having the warranty run a bit is probably kind of the least of your concerns, because if there is an issue with that equipment, you're probably going to work it out in some other partnership oriented commercial way and kind of come up with a big beautiful deal anyway.
And like Mark said, the more you work with that supplier, the more help you're probably going to get if something isn't working down the road.
I mean, or not, and then it's a parting of ways, right? But they probably wouldn't want that.
Well, and also
all the folks on the
but because our customer base is not huge, right? And so the customer is going to know what's going on with the supplier as well. And so, like Ish said, it's an ecosystem, and either you're going to work with us or you're not going to have a place in the industry. So that does help.
Yeah, that was one of the things that actually surprised me coming from oil and gas, where we had a lot of litigation. I have a very small litigation portfolio because most of these things have to be solved commercially, as kind of Ish noted, or else you're just not going to not be involved in this.
So now moving to, speaking of wheeling and dealing, back to that regulatory issues. I mean, every state is approaching this in such different ways. How are you all kind of navigating this landscape of changing laws that could change weekly or monthly or sooner?
For us, we've been very proactive in really working with, like when we worked with North Dakota. North Dakota has been an extraordinary partner with us, and they've been very open to listening to our ideas and how really you should regulate data centers. And we've largely brought forward kind of our suggestions on kind of what this needs to look like for it to work for both of us as a partnership. And I think that's really key for us and why we were kind of really focusing on developing there, because they've been a really good partner. In other states, it might be a little bit more challenging. There may be other issues that you have, whether it's from a taxation perspective or a permitting perspective, that make it a little bit more difficult, at least for us, to build in those states. So we're just having to be very selective in the states that we partner with, to make sure that it really is a win-win when we develop sites in their locations.
And also the data center industry has recognized that it's an issue. And so we've created something called the Data Center Coalition. Vantage, I know, is a member as well. And we, as part of that coalition, we have a state policy board. And so we are monitoring all of the states, and they have a whole staff that helps with that. And the greatest thing I think about the Data Center Coalition, and it's not just us, it's not just data center developers, customers are part of it, and suppliers as well, because it's obviously affecting everybody. And so I was happy to see that as a, because we needed to come together as an industry to address these issues.
Yeah, and I would just give kind of a boring answer to this, which is we just hire really smart people, right? I mean, before we go and involve ourselves too far in any kind of site selection effort, there's local land use council involved, and we always make sure that they're on top of all the developments. We use a good air permitting consultant. There's a consultant for incentives, right? I mean, it's find the smart people and as a lean team, ride their backs.
I always hear people internally say, hey, we use all these firms. Should we concentrate it with like 5 or 10 firms for buying power? And I'm like, absolutely not. Because if we're in some jurisdiction where the expert is a solo practitioner or at a boutique, which is usually the case, we're going to use that guy. And in fact, we do that all over. And that's why we use, over 200 law firms. So
Oh, wow.
Michael's point is exactly right. I mean, you really do try to find sort of local people who know how things work, and can be a good partner in just understanding sort of the local lay of the land. And then you've got the public policy overlay, which is that whatever the legal framework is aside, you may just face opposition that you've got to work with, wherever that is.
So, Mark, you mentioned compressed timelines as another issue, which I want to come back to. But Michael, and Mark, I'm curious if you have any other pressing challenges that you think you're seeing in construction today.
I think
Yeah, I mean, I can. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, no, go ahead, please.
No. The only. Sorry, I didn't know if you were calling on Mark,
Yeah.
or if you were. Yeah,
No.
my bad.
It's a roundtable. Speak up.
Okay. Just one I don't think we've talked about is we're kind of at a point where we need the GCs more than they need us. So it's in the past, whereas maybe we had a bit more negotiating power. Now you're gonna have to sometimes take the terms of these big GCs, and they've negotiated so many GC contracts. They know exactly where all of their pressure points are. And so you've got to get more creative, kind of partnering with your insurance folks internally. For some of you all, that might be in your team. It's in our company, it's within finance, and figuring out, like, do we increase limits? Do we get specific types of insurance that can cover us if something goes south? Because the legal terms might not be what you got 4 years ago when you were interviewing a bunch of GCs and it was more of a beauty contest.
And that's very, I mean, he kind of, to a degree, stole my answer a little bit. And I was going to mention the exact same thing, which is the competition for the GCs. For us, I mean, obviously experience is kind of key. We want people who've built data centers, but a lot of times we don't actually have the ability to get them. So we're actually having to go to general contractors who haven't built data centers before. And then what we end up having to do is really develop strong internal teams that have that experience, that are really acting as mentors and overseers to ensure that these folks who've never built one before are being able to execute our fairly complicated designs flawlessly, because flawless is really what you need to do to create one of these data centers and kind of run it. So that's how we've kind of managed it. And then kind of as a corollary to that, the location is challenging. Like when you're in Ellendale, North Dakota, that has a population of 1,100, getting the workforce there to build these data centers can be challenging. And what that's led to, at least for us, is figuring out how do we provide housing for these folks in this town? How do we get there and incentivize them to come here and work for us to build their data centers? And that's been kind of something that like at a high level, when you come to this, I wouldn't have really anticipated those to kind of be the challenges that we would face.
And you could do what T5 did, is we just created our own GC. So literally, since I've been there in 2 years, I think we've increased 500% in terms of our construction business. And Mark, I totally agree with you. I think in the construction business, our biggest issue is labor, is people, right? Like we're building, right? You're not building in metropolitan cities and getting your labor out there and getting labor who knows what they're doing in a data center, because it is different. So I would say that's our biggest challenge on our construction team.
Okay, so getting back to compressed timelines. So yes, I completely agree with you, and I wonder if the others do as well, that things were leisurely a few years ago. Leisurely is not a term that we can use anymore with data center construction. So I'm curious what others think about that, and just generally if there's any kind of other trends that you all are seeing that are going to shape the future of construction and data center industry. I mean, that are really going to start affecting how everybody builds these things in the future going forward. Michael, any thoughts there?
One trend that came up a little bit earlier, but I'll emphasize it, is, it was just a couple years ago, 100 megawatts was a big data center, and now there's multi-gigawatt campuses, and we just discussed kind of the booming demand and the lack of general contractor capacity to complete these projects. So look, I think you're probably going to see a lot more multi-prime projects. They're just a lot messier from an administration perspective, candidly.
Ish, any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think at a fundamental level, the product is going to change given the increased scale. Everything that was mentioned, Michael, talking about, multiple GCs. But I think in general, the potential uncertainties around being able to execute on time and on a scale that, not only you've never done before, but sort of the industry has never done before. There are a lot of unknowns there, I think. I mean, I think we've all, put a keen eye on Crusoe because they're sort of the first huge one in Texas, and sort of seeing what went right and what, challenges and opportunities there might have been. But I think all of us are going to face stuff we've probably never seen before.
Mark?
I think from like a trend perspective, so from the contracting, we're increasing liquidated damages, because I mean, obviously we're facing heavy penalties if we don't deliver our data centers on time. So we're going to pass those on to the contractor, and also guaranteed maximum contracts as well. Any cost of overruns, we're trying to push that to the GCs where possible. And as Ish noted, the negotiating strength of either party, it's a little different. The dynamic has changed a little bit, but when we're working with GCs on these projects that can cost a great deal of money, there is a little bit of power that we still hold and can wield to try and get all of our interests aligned to ensure that we're really getting to deliver our product when we have to.
Yeah, Mark, and I think along those lines, what I've spent a lot of time focusing on is a force majeure provision, right? Especially when I'm on the construction side, or even if I'm in between the customer and construction, right? Is there's still things, no matter what we do, no matter how many people we hire, how many shifts we run, I can't control delivery, right? Or I can't control supply chain. And so I spend a lot of time talking on both sides about what are the exceptions, because like you said, LDs are becoming the norm.
Yeah, and my observation, Karen, it's incremental, but I do feel like even in I've been in this industry for all of 2 years now, but I have seen a little bit of movement here, whereas, it's not you get 30 days grace and 30 days for force majeure. And, I am seeing now that these projects are getting bigger and more audacious, the customers are kind of willing to bear some more of this risk. And so
Agreed.
I'm hopeful that things continue to move in that direction.
Yeah.
So this is a professionalism CLE, so we do need to talk about a little bit of professionalism, but I think this is actually a perfect segue to Karen's quote, which she gave to us before, and all of you in the audience should have a copy of, from the Georgia Bar earlier today. And I want to read this quote and kind of talk about it, especially thinking about what we just said regarding potential multi-primes, having a bunch of GCs that maybe don't have the most experience with this particular industry, with perhaps GCs that have more leverage than they have had in the past, and how we're dealing with how both GCs should be dealing with owners in this new industry, how owners should be dealing with these GCs. So Karen's quote was, "Professionalism as an attorney means not just advising as to the law, but ensuring that your judgment and actions encompass integrity, honesty, and transparency. It also means treating all parties with respect." I'm sure that I could have used that last line in a few negotiations over the past year. But so I'm curious if you've seen kind of the rapid fire pace of this industry, if professionalism in your eyes has been affected at all, how your definition of professionalism influenced your approach, and generally what your thoughts are here. So Karen, maybe it's your quote, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, and so to me, the key words were transparency, obviously honesty and transparency. And I think that goes, as in-house counsel, it goes for your internal team as much as it goes for dealing with outside third parties, right? We have to be honest, even with our own abilities, right? As a GC, we could take on a project every day, right, that comes in, and having to be able to say, we can't handle this, right? We can't take on the next project, or the demands of this customer are not ones that we can meet. We need to be able to comply and deliver. And so I think, again, as part of being a legal advisor is also helping your teams be realists and being honest with them. And sometimes I have to deliver the bad news, right? That's my job, but that's also, again, part of being a legal advisor. In terms of respect and professionalism, I just feel like, again, Ish said it very well. It's an ecosystem. It's a small community, and deals are going to get done if you're respectful. There are some out there who are not, but you know about it and you learn about it quickly. And I just feel like you're going to get so much more done if you're just treating people professionally.
Right. So
Also,
Mark,
you're gonna see them again. Sorry.
Right,
I
Exactly.
right.
I worked with a lawyer at a customer. That lawyer ended up being moving to an investor, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And so, gosh, treating people with respect is table stakes, but even more, I think fostering relationships. Like Michael will ping me and, hey, what have you seen, here, or what lawyers have you worked with on this particular thing, and kind of sharing notes and just trying to be helpful to each other. I do that with like a lot of GCs, and I look forward to doing the same with Karen and Mark after this. But I just collegiality, and just we're all part of this profession, and at the highest level, I think it's a lot of camaraderie and cooperation, which is great, even if you're on completely opposite sides of the table.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that completely. I had a kind of funny of a conversation with one of my counterparts that we were negotiating with, and they were pushing a lot of points, and I said, basically pulled them aside and said, look, we can continue to do this and be contentious, but we're getting married. Like these leases are very long. We're getting married, and we can have a contentious marriage, or we can have like a good marriage. And we really want to start this off as a real partnership. We're being transparent with you, what we can deliver. We don't want you guys to go really punitive. if, you know, we have a miss here or there as we kind of work through this. And I think that really resonated with them, and we're able to kind of get to where everybody's happy, or at least mildly, a little less unhappy than they would otherwise be. And as you said, you're going to see each other again. There are only so many players in this realm. You're going to come across each other, and it doesn't do anybody any good to be overly difficult when it's just not necessary.
Yeah, I would agree with everything said there. And particularly like the references to, you know, we have to be long-term partners with our counterparties here. These are long-term leases. We will see everybody again. I've, you know, at times in my career, probably been guilty of feeling really passionately about points and wanting to win them. And I've tried to make a point recently of, you know, actually visualizing myself in the other person's seat and thinking about what they're seeing from their perspective, and really understand their concerns. And at the end of the day, you know, it's a partnership mindset, try to find that win-win middle ground. In fact, in some instances recently, I think I've even said, guys, we're both on the extremes here, and we've hired really sophisticated people, so maybe they can just tell us where this usually lands, right? Let's land a plane. So.
Yeah, interesting and agreed, definitely. And I think it's interesting if you all read all of the quotes, almost all of them do mention respect and integrity, regarding not only internal but external as well. So Ish, I do want to read out your quote as well, because I think it's an interesting, it would have an interesting discussion regarding this. So you said professionalism, excuse me, means asking not only if a particular action to be taken is legal, but also whether such action is the right thing to do. So how do you balance ethical obligations with business pressures in these kind of high stakes environments? How does professionalism factor into that? And Nish, maybe we could start with you with your quote.
Yeah, it's always fun to think about examples of that where it's legal but might not be the right thing. I'll recall an example from my M&A practice days. Everyone's pulling a triple all-nighter on an auction. We're representing one of the bidders. There's 3 other bidders in the auction. And a lot of us have seen this maybe once in our career. You accidentally get the red lines that were supposed to go to another bidder, right? They come at 2:18 a.m. It's some poor associate at a firm who hasn't slept in 3 days, and he or she just hit the wrong button. And if I open those red lines, no one's going to come arrest me, but I'm not supposed to have those. And I've got ethical obligations that would say that I shouldn't pop those open and report out to my client as to what's in there. Another example that might be more relevant to this group is people are starting to move around. Anyone who works at any of our companies have a valuable line on their resume that allows them to work anywhere else. Someone comes to your company and they bring know-how, and that know-how might be proprietary to somewhere else they worked. Maybe they worked at a customer, which makes it even dicier. And in those sorts of circumstances, Greg, that's a little bit of a worse example because some of that it does have legal protection. But I'll tell you, there's a lot of know-how in the data center industry that hasn't really been meaningfully protected. And so you do get into those situations. And I mean, I think the most important thing is tone at the top. Like at our company, it's made very clear to us, and I'm one of the people hopefully making it clear that we just don't want to win if it's winning in a way that's unethical. We'd rather just not win the opportunity. And so just prioritizing that above all else and making sure people understand that they've got skin in the game. A lot of us here are paid in, equity in whatever, company we're at. And there's no way to destroy that value more quickly than if you have any sort of an ethical issue, bribery, anything like that. So
Right, comes back to relationships, right? It's a quick moving world, but it's a small world.
Totally.
Karen, I saw you nodding along. Any additional
Well,
thoughts?
what really resonated with me is tone at the top, right? And if your senior management wants to do the right thing, right, it makes your job so much easier, and it makes you less concerned about the enterprise and the employees as a whole. And so I'm a key believer in it, that has to come from the top.
Michael, Mark, any last thoughts on this?
No, I mean, I agree 100%. I mean, so some of the places that I've worked at in the past, some of them are extraordinarily competitive and it's a win at all cost kind of mentality. And that can be toxic, frankly. And one of the things I really enjoy about Applied Digital is that it is not that. It's we want to do the right things. We want to win based on the quality of our product. We want to win in the right way. And it's just so much nicer place to come to work, truthfully. When people operate in a way that is ethical, they're doing the right thing, they're caring about people, they're caring about commercial relationships. And it's just such a much easier way to just conduct your life without all the other stresses of having to try and be difficult and Machiavellian in the way you approach your business.
Yeah, I agree with everything said. I think the question was about balancing business concerns with ethics, and theoretically, that should be a pretty easy thing to do, right? Like we're just going to do what's right. But I think, the examples that Ish raised in particular, there are situations that are really dicey that you hope to not come across very often. But the tone from the top really has to be set strongly. At our company, our CEO likes to say, I don't care about winning if we're not doing what's right. Like we do what's right at the expense of business opportunities. It's okay. So that's I love that message, and it sounds like everybody here kind of lives by that similar ethos.
Yeah, agreed. That's wonderful. So I'd love to spend a few minutes before we get to our Q&A talking a little bit about AI integration. I'm curious if you all, AI being so important to this industry, obviously, are you all using AI at all in your legal practices? If so, how? And how does legal professionalism kind of inform the use of AI in your legal practice? Mark, Karen, maybe you want to start?
Certainly, we're certainly using AI. We'll use some of the various products to do some initial drafts. And frankly, right at this point, it's largely me just kind of playing with it to kind of see the capabilities of the tools and then kind of validating it against kind of what I would have drafted otherwise and kind of verifying. So trusting a little bit, but verifying the quality of the tool. And I think that kind of goes to what we're really talking about, which is you can't just outsource your legal judgment to a tool. It's a tool to help you be more effective, but it is nothing else but a tool. And you have to go through it and apply your judgment, your experience to make sure that what you're putting together still meets the criteria for you being competent and giving advice that's prudent for your organization. So we're certainly utilizing those tools. We're also going so far as to kind of conduct training with our employees beyond the legal department to ensure that they're doing the same thing. That, hey, we want you to utilize AI. Obviously, we're creating AI factories and we want you to use these things as well. However, you need to do so prudently and ensure that you're executing your job in the way that you're expected to.
A very interesting point is we have a few of the big customers who we're building AI data centers for who have specifically asked us not to use AI
really?
to operate the data centers, which I think is interesting.
That is
I
interesting.
don't know how long that will last, but we do have, and so like Mark said, we have to do some training on what you can and cannot use AI for.
That I'll admit I hadn't heard. Now, are they saying don't use it for anything ever, or not for substantive, or not
Certain
for
things within the operations of the data center, right? This is and you're on the operating side, and you've got SLAs, and you've got to keep everyone on 24/7.
Oh yeah, 5 nines. Interesting. Michael, Ish, any AI usage in your companies?
Like others, we have policies about what you can and can't use it for, not feeding confidential information in there, certainly not any tenant related information. As a legal team, I think we're still, kind of Luddites. I think we're trying to figure it out, but, I've kind of used it for like, give me a high level overview of this issue or that issue. And it's a starting place, or a starting place for a policy or a very simple document draft. But yeah, similar to what Mark said, it still feels a little bit like a toy to me. I haven't quite figured out how to use it in my day to day.
Ish, how about you?
Yeah, I've mainly tried to use it in ways that don't require either feeding in confidential info or engaging with it using sort of anything I would consider sensitive. I have found it really helpful, though, just kind of as stuff pops up during the workday. I had to have a sensitive HR discussion with a teammate. And after kind of adapting and adjusting the prompts, I was pretty surprised by the script I got from ChatGPT. It was phenomenal, to be honest. Um, and I used those talking points and it ended up being a difficult discussion, but one that went pretty well. So, that's not a purely legal application, but it was an application of it in my work as a senior person at the company where I found it very helpful. I think that's just going to increase. I think everyone's worried about um, feeding confidential information into the computer, but I think people are going to get over that. And then there's going to be a period during which it starts to solve a lot of problems for us. So.
So let's move that from an internal question to an external question. Are you expecting, because I know that we have a lot of lawyers on the call, as the camera moves around, are you expecting your outside counsel to be using AI? And if so, for what? Or would you prefer that they not use AI at this point? This is for anyone.
I think it can be particularly useful on kind of large scale diligence type activities. Document review type stuff. We would obviously want that done through some kind of, a Harvey-like model that's not just that's not trained on sort of everything and taking everything in and re-putting it into the model. But yeah, hard for me to come up with what our company does in particular on a regular basis, other use cases.
Yeah, I think we use it in that exact way for diligence, and we've seen the outside counsel use it for those types of things, and I think that makes complete sense. And if it saves me a little bit on the bill, that's great. But certainly, there are going to be limits to what we can utilize it for. I think internally we use it. Also, like on diligence, we'll do a lot of summaries. One of my colleagues is extraordinary in AI, and he's kind of developed his own model that we really kind of use to kind of summarize documents and kind of get to be able to kind of create presentations to basically get the main points that we need to discuss with upper level management to get their feedback on. So that's been a pretty good use and time saver for us.
I also think as we look at implementing CLM kind of systems and those type of operating systems that support legal, I think you're going to see it more and more. And those applications can be helpful, right? Tell me, like you said, due diligence. Tell me every contract that has this provision. So I think there's uses for it, but we'll see how it progresses, right? Because I still want a legal eye looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, the folks on this phone use sophisticated counsel. And so if they, in their judgment, believe that by supplementing with AI, they can do their job better, as long as there's that human check, I think,
Exactly.
more power to them, because I think it's going to keep getting better. And as they use AI more, the AI is going to get better. So it'll become a win-win over time.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so I'd love to move to a question or two from our chat, and if you all have any questions that you want to ask, I'll ask for that in a minute. So let's answer one from Matthew McGrath. He said, "Can the panelists speak to how a new project is typically structured and financed, and how counterparties such as equipment suppliers, utility credit requirements are addressed?" Can anyone speak to that? Michael, you're nodding. Dive on in.
Well, yes, I think there's a reference to SPV in the question.
Yeah.
I mean, that is typically how we structure projects, with an SPV, just like any real estate project with an SPV that owns the dirt. You do some sort of construction or project financing. Usually there's an equity pledge involved in a lot of the project style deals. As to sort of showing credit worthiness to counterparties, the utilities have really become the tough ones, is the truth. Some of the credit requirements, terms of guarantees, cash collateral, giant letters of credit, for a company our size, we have to frankly go to battle over those, and a lot of times bring in the customer as reinforcement, which kind of leads to like the chicken and the egg thing, right? Like the customer's really not that interested till the power's there, and the power company doesn't take you seriously till the customer's there. So yeah, it's a fun balancing act, and yes, with suppliers, certainly they think about probably the fact that you might be using a special purpose entity, but that to me kind of goes to the importance of having an established relationship. If they know you've made good on similar promises before, we haven't had too much issue with that.
I mean, the other thing to address, right, Michael? I mean, not to put words in your mouth, but these counterparties are going to look at the investors that are behind you, and if they're comfortable with the credit quality there, that's certainly going to help you.
Yeah.
At the SPV level, you might be pretty uncreditworthy, but there's sort of an implied backing there that I think they get comfortable with.
And also, if you do have a customer, right, if you're building for a particular customer, that also makes a big difference.
So we have a question that just came in from Alan Poole. We are constantly fighting, that went down, false narratives and trying to do it before it's time to get in front of the zoning board. How involved does your team get with community messaging, government affairs, and the like?
For us, we are very involved. We get involved very early. We send our external affairs team to meet with folks on a regular basis. We're trying to educate them on things. So, for example, like in terms of false narratives, people talking about, oh, you're utilizing all this water. Our systems are closed circuit cooling systems. We're not using any water. So we're not taking any water there. Oh, you're taking power away from this, that, or the other. No, this is excess power that's not being utilized. Otherwise, that's why we're here. So we do have to get very involved with those and have those conversations at basically at all levels of government, from community all the way up to governor, to make sure that people really understand what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Great. Thank you, Mark. I think Kevin and Patrick had kind of a similar question that we can put together. Kevin asked, what kind of on-site power are you all seeing? Renewables, nat gas, all of the above. And Patrick similarly asked, what is the current and long-term feasibility of small modular reactors in the US? So what are you all seeing for types of power, and is it nuclear?
I can address the nuclear one, although I don't know more than anyone else here. I think we still have considerable regulatory impediments. I think it would, in a lot of ways, be a magic bullet that would solve a lot of our issues. I'd be really interested to see, though, if there's political will to get rid of the impediments that have typically been there for nuclear. There's the plant expansion in Georgia that I think received a lot of press, significantly over budget, significantly delayed timeline, and I think that makes people skittish about investing in nuclear.
I do think that Vogt was a large facility and not an SMR, but I do hear your point, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think most of what we're exploring is natural gas. I think, the customers view that as relatively clean. It's a much more stable source than most of your renewables. Although, we're looking at doing some, wind and solar projects adjacent to some of our facilities as well. So I think all of those are very viable options.
Karen, Mark, any nuclear?
I was going to say, I just think the industry is looking at all of it. And to this point, none of the renewables produces enough. So we have to keep our eye on it, right? And we have to dedicate time to it, because it's becoming, a true obstacle.
Yeah, I mean, our power is a mix. I mean, it's wind, it's fossil fuels, it's nat gas. So it's a mix of things, and I think it has to be right now. You have to have a portfolio essentially, because like Karen noted, it's no one is really going to solve all your problems. We haven't really looked at the nuclear option as something that's really viable at this point, but certainly, that Ish notes, maybe in the future as regulatory environments change, maybe that is something that becomes a little bit more viable for us to utilize.
So Robert Brown asks us to look to the future. When does the data center boom end? And what are the signs you expect to see that indicates the tide has changed? Will this ever end? I don't think so, but I'm curious what y'all think.
I don't know. Everything comes to an end. Like
That's true.
the pendulum always swings. think, we'd all be very smart to be able to predict something like that. But I don't know, something I think about a lot is like, at some point, there has to be really material revenue generation from the application layer of AI. People aren't going to continue to throw money at it forever. And I do think that's like, ChatGPT is a company or OpenAI, does have real revenue, albeit huge losses. But I think that is hopefully going to materialize, but you can imagine a world in which there are, a lot of players at the application level that just don't survive. And, how that sort of trickles through the ecosystem, TBD.
I think it's going to be around at least, I mean, certainly, as Michael knows, certainly everything ends and once they perform or something else comes along. But the growth that we're experiencing here, I don't think that's going to stop anytime soon. Our CEO likes to quote, he talks about how like Google, to get to 1 billion searches a day, it took them, I think it was like 11 years. And then when you look at like ChatGPT, to get to 1 billion searches, it took like 2 or 3 years. So the growth is just exponential. So I certainly don't see the demand waning, and certainly the inquiries we're getting for demand extend out a pretty long way. So I don't think it's anything where, at least I'm not concerned that this is going to end at least before I retire. And I guess we'll see what happens thereafter.
So I wanted to ask anyone from the audience, if you have any additional questions, now would be a time to go off of mute and feel free to ask our amazing panelists. Going once, going twice. Okay, then we'll just go with one last final question, and then we'll sign off. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So listen, we're going to do another data center in-house roundtable a year from now. Be the prognosticator, tell the future. What are we going to be talking about a year from now that has gone really, really well and has improved? And what's going to be a problem a year from now?
I think the problem a year from now is going to be regulation.
Mark.
I think what I think is going to improve is build times. So I mean, we're seeing that our build times come down quite a bit. As we kind of refine our designs, and I think that's going to continue in order to meet the demands that we're seeing. So you're going to see these data centers go up a lot quicker.
Ish?
I think as a lot of money gets invested into the industry, I think a question a year from now, and I think people are already sort of asking it, is where does the capital sort of continue to come from? And what sources? You've got private credit and other large players coming into it. I think there are other folks that are sort of on the sidelines, but this is an industry that's going to continue to require gobs of capital. So I think that's going to be foremost in folks' minds, and even more so a year from now.
Yeah, I'm actually, Ish kind of took my answer there, so I'm just going to emphasize what he said.
Sorry.
But the numbers of billions, the tens and hundreds of billions are pretty staggering. And then you also have to think about, there's a difference between the type of investor that takes construction or development risk versus the type of investor that buys stabilized assets, and sort of how that gets chopped up. And that's led to a lot of new products in the market. The data center financing market is different than it was a year ago. It will, in all likelihood, be very different next year.
Interesting. Well, listen, thank you to the Georgia Bar for hosting us. Thank you to the construction section for putting this together. And thank you to our wonderful panelists for really interesting discussion. I know that everybody's clapping on mute right now for you all. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking the time. There we go. There's one. And to everybody here, have a wonderful day. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out at any time. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all. Great panel.